Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we're going to take a closer look at this gcloud command that we've been using in all of our labs. Now you will definitely need to know this material for your exam, but of course it's also very helpful for just day-to-day stuff. First of all, let's just start off with what it is. As I'm sure you've already been able to see, gcloud is a command line tool to interact with the Google Cloud platform. But it's more than just gcloud really, because gsutil and bq are very much related. In fact, all of these tools will share the same configuration that you set using gcloud config. And when you type gsutil, it's almost as if you could have typed gcloud storage. And when you type bq, it's as if you would have typed gcloud BigQuery. Now you can't actually call gcloud with storage or BigQuery right now. I just mean that these tools work in a way that I imagine would have worked like that. Now I've linked some documentation to this resource and I highly recommend that you read through all of it. You might want to go through all of it right after this lecture and also make a note to review it before your exam. Well, so far through this course, we've definitely been interacting with the Google Cloud platform through both the console and command line tools. Now, in general, these command line tools are more powerful than the console is, but less powerful than calling the REST API directly. What I mean is that some things that you can do in the command line tools are not actually possible in the console, and still some other things are only possible when you use the API directly. Now, Google is constantly adding new functionality to gcloud, and if you want to use some of that before it's been fully vetted and released, you can access that through gcloud alpha or gcloud beta. For example, at the time that I'm recording this, if you want to list the billing accounts you have access to, you need to use gcloud beta billing accounts list. And if you want to associate a particular project with a particular billing account, you need to use this command. Now it's possible that by the time you watch this video, this billing functionality has been released in the normal gcloud command. But the point really is that functionality will be available earlier through the alpha and beta channels than they will in the normal one. You can feel free to use that functionality to do your job, you just need to be aware that it might change on you. Alright, let's take a look at the syntax of a gcloud command. Now here's another link to a document, and I strongly recommend that you read through this as well. It's really valuable information. Now to run gcloud, you type gcloud as we've been doing this whole time, and after that you can optionally give it some global flags. Now after that you will definitely need to specify the service or product that you want to use. Each service or product may be broken down into a group or area, and then you will give it a command, something you want it to do. That command might have some flags or parameters, through which you can give it the details about what you want it to do. Now notice that in this syntax we're always drilling down as we go from left to right. And since we always specify the service or product before we specify the command or verb of what we want it to do, you would never have a command like gcloud create instances, because create is not a service, it's a command, and you would have to first specify that you want to use the compute service. Alright, let's take a look at a few examples. You could specify a command like gcloud --project myprojid compute instances list. In this case, --project myprojid is a global flag, compute is the service, instances is the area inside of compute that you want to act on, and then list is the command that you want it to run. This command has no flags or parameters. Now another way we could have specified this global flag is to enter --project equals myprojid. Whether you put a space there or an equal sign doesn't really matter. They still go together as one global flag. Now in a lot of the commands we've been running, we haven't been specifying the project. Instead, we've been relying on the project being set in a configuration. So we've typed things like gcloud compute instances create myVM. Now in this case, compute instances specifies the same service and area as the last one, But whereas the last one was telling gcloud to list the instances, this one gives the command to create an instance. Now this create command needs you to specify a name, so that's why we passed myVM as the name parameter. Not all commands have parameters though. Sometimes they'll use flags instead, such as gcloud services list, which uses the -- available flag. Now as I mentioned, gsutil is definitely in this same family. In this case, gsutil implies that you're working against the Google Cloud Storage Service, and the command is to list. You can also give a command to make bucket, and that takes a flag to specify the location, and then the bucket name is specified as the parameter. For this example, gsutil also has you specify the area, which is label. The command is to set, and that command takes two parameters. The first parameter is the name of the file that has the label's JSON document, and the second parameter is the bucket that you want to act on. Alright, let's take a quick look at the global flags that you could pass. Now this is not an exhaustive list, but it is the most interesting ones. As we've seen, you can pass --help or -h to get information about the command that you want to run, and you can also specify a particular project with a --project and then giving the project ID. --account will let you specify a particular account that you want to use, such as might be useful if you're logged in as both an admin and a user account. --filter can let you cut down the information that gets returned, and this global flag is not always available, but when it is, it's often better than using grep. Another helpful global flag is --format. That can let you choose to have the output formatted as either JSON, YAML, comma-separated value, or something else. It can be particularly useful to output some data as JSON and then pipe it to the jq command to do extra processing. One more global flag to mention is the --quiet or -q. If you specify this, gcloud won't prompt you to confirm about destructive actions. This could definitely be helpful if you have a script that needs to do something like that, but it's also something to be quite careful about using, because you might not get prompted and save yourself from making a silly mistake. The next thing I want to talk about is configuration properties. These are values that are entered once and can then be used by any command that needs them. This is usually how you specify the project. But like I mentioned about the global flag, these properties can be overridden on a specific gcloud command when you use the appropriate flag. Now these config properties are used very often for the account, project, region, and zone. So if you don't want to have to specify --account every time you run gcloud, you can set this account property. Now technically the property is core/account, but because it's a core property, you can get away with just specifying account. Similarly, --project is what you would have to specify if you hadn't already set the core/project property. And again, you can refer to this as simply project. Now if you want to avoid using the --region, you'll have to set the compute/region property. Just setting region by itself won't work. Similarly, you'll have to specify --zone for any command that needs it if you haven't set the compute/zone property. Now to set any of these properties, you would type gcloud config set and then the property and then the value you want to set it to. And if you want to see what it's set to, you can check that with gcloud config get-value and then the property name. And if you no longer want a particular property to be set, you can clear it with gcloud config unset and the property. Next, let's take a look at gcloud's configurations. Configurations are a way to maintain groups of settings and switch between them. Now these are most useful when you're using multiple projects, but you might also want to use them to switch between different accounts, regions, zones, or things like that. Now you can type gcloud init to get an interactive workflow to set a bunch of these common properties in a configuration, and you can list all the properties that are set in a configuration with gcloud config list. Now notice that this is quite different than listing all of the configurations that you have which is what you would get if you typed gcloud config configurations list. You definitely don't want to get yourself confused with all of these different things. Remember that gcloud init is going to ask you a bunch of questions to set a bunch of properties. gcloud config list will show you all of the properties that are set in that configuration. And if you want to see which configurations you have, you need to specify gcloud config configurations list. Now, when you do run this last command, you get a table of all the configurations, and one of the columns that shows up is called isActive. This column will tell you which one of your configurations is currently being used, and the other columns in that table will show you what the account, project, region, zone, and name of the config are. Now, when you start off using gcloud, you'll only have one configuration, but you can make a new configuration with gcloud config configurations create and then the name you want to give it. To switch to that new configuration, you would type gcloud config configurations activate and then that name. Or if you want to use that configuration for just one gcloud command, you can give it the global flag -- configuration and then its name. Okay, I recognize that this is a lot of new information on the screen all at once. So let me give you an analogy that will hopefully help this information about configurations sink in. Let's compare working with directories on the command line to working with configurations on the command line. If you want to make a new directory, you would type something like makedir and then the new directory's name. To make a new configuration, you would type something like gcloud config configurations create and then the name of the new configuration. But both of these are really just a container to hold new things. In the case of the directory, it will hold new files in other directories. And in the case of the configuration, it will hold properties. But when you want to work with a directory, you don't just create it, you generally will also switch to it, using something like cd and then the name of the directory. That makes that new directory the context in which you're working. And the same thing goes for configurations. Creating a configuration is different than switching to it. Now, to be fair, when you do create a configuration using that command line, it will actually also activate it immediately, but you will only make the configuration once, and you could switch to it any number of times. Now, once you're inside of a particular directory, when that's your working directory, you can list its contents with just ls. This is similar to how gcloud config list will list the properties in the active configuration. But if you want to list the contents of some directory that is not currently your working directory, you can still do that too, but you need to provide the information at the command line. You would say ls and then the path to that directory. Here, I'm just assuming that that directory is in your home directory, represented by the tilde. Now for configurations, you could still list the properties of some configuration that's not the active one by passing the -- configuration equals and then the name of the configuration that you want. But as a helpful student named Chris pointed out, there's another version of the command that can list the properties too. gcloud config configurations describe and then the name of the configuration will also print all of the properties in that configuration, but in a slightly different format than the one that you see when you type gcloud config list. All right, I want to draw your attention one more time to the documentation that's attached to this lecture. It's really important that you read it because it adds a lot of context and really helps this information sink in. You should also definitely re-watch this lecture before your exam, and whenever else you might need a reminder on how all of this works. Practice all of this until you've really got it down pat. Alright, if you have any questions, please let me know. If not, please feel free to move on to the next lecture. Thank you.